what a race this past weekend was. It was the Japanese Grand Prix. Um, there were retirements, there were first podiums, double DNS for a top performing team that still managed to get a win, and a bunch more. I just want to welcome everyone back to Figuring Out the Formula. I'm your host, Kyle. I'm here with Chandler and Patrick, as always. Raise one up, boys. This was a hell of a weekend.
Yes, sir. Who would have thought in the land of the rising sun, we see Red Bull double DNF and still finish on top?
Well, you spoiled it, but we'll go from there, Chan. Fucking Chandler. So we're just going to jump right in here to the practice session here in this race weekend. Me and Chandler are huge McLaren fans, and something that I'm really excited for because we really don't know where Lando's going to go next year. There's rumors about him going to Red Bull and all that, but hope he stays with McLaren because the driver lineup this year is crazy. Him and Oscar, a rookie, is doing great. Amazing things like you wouldn't expect from a rookie that haven't been done in quite some time. McLaren actually just signed Oscar Piastri until 2026. So huge dub, big bang for McLaren. I think it's great. If we are able to keep this lineup, boys, and we keep developing this car,
rookie who going into this race weekend was top 10 in the driver standings in a car that had a very pitiful start to the season and is really just gaining ground now. To be a rookie in top 10 with that car with 6 races to go, who knows where he could end up at?
No, I 100% agree.
It's exciting.
It is pretty soon. Like if he keeps going the way he's going, you're going to see Patrick bandwagon over here. He's going to have a McLaren shirt. He's going to throw all his Red Bull shirts out, all this stuff.
Throwing the shade. I already like McLaren. I don't have any.
Well, somebody had to throw shades since you don't have your Dion shades this week.
Yeah, I mean,
they're in my car. Okay. They got used pretty heavily this weekend.
Okay, yeah, get beat 42-6, and all of a sudden they leave them in the car.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't like Colorado. No. I was expecting them to get destroyed, but
yeah, his Pat's sunglasses went out for some milk and cigarettes and just haven't come back yet. Fucking crazy. Speaking of that, fucking crazy. In this practice session, we had some contracts being signed. Like Oscar wasn't the only one. You had Yuki who was signed. AlphaTauri really was debating on whether to re-sign him or not, but Honda is a critical partner for Red Bull and AlphaTauri, and they wanted the deal done by this weekend in Japan so that they can all celebrate. I thought that was cool that Yuki has that much of a pull, if you want to call it that, but like that Honda loves Yuki that much and believes in him that much that they're willing to do that. Because I mean, I don't think he deserved a contract right now. Maybe at the end of the season is when you have a real conversation, but right now, to have the support from their major partners, that's got to feel good for Yuki.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say that, obviously we didn't all foresee disregarding Nick DeVries. We didn't see Daniel Ricciardo racing 2 races and breaking his wrist. And, the emergence of Liam Lawson, who we've talked about last week in the episode a lot, but has shown pretty steady racecraft in his first couple of races. So that's really kind of what made AlphaTauri have to think about this. So I'm kind of surprised that it came out as soon as it did. Like you said, Kyle, I'm surprised not the end of the season, but that is just kind of a testament of how this sport is more money driven than a lot of folks may think or some other sports may be. But good for Yuki. I don't think he's done anything to drive himself out of a seat. I just was kind of like
it's a lot
battle,
Yeah,
so.
it's a laissez-faire attitude to him, right? Like I did see a cool clip though. He gave his racing suit to the Japanese Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister was so shocked and so honored by it. They were both bowing to each other and showing massive respect. I thought that was really like. It's one thing to, get like a signed shirt or something, but to actually do basically a jersey swap just with a race suit and about like it was pretty cool to see the Japanese culture on highlight right there between a Japanese born driver and the prime minister.
Absolutely.
Huge national pride in Japan this weekend. Something that us Americans haven't felt in quite some time regarding F1 drivers. So we made a huge deal about Logan Sargent at the beginning of the year. We finally have an American driver in the sport ready to show the world what Americans can do. I'm sad to say that he's fucking garbage, guys. This guy couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat.
There's the old NFL coach Dennis Green, who rest in peace. But he had a famous post-game press conference of they were who we thought they were. That's what the Europeans are doing about us Americans supporting Logan Sargent. Like that's what an American driving F1. It's like he is who we thought he is. So I hate it, but that's where we're at right now.
Regarding this past weekend's race, in Q1, Logan Sargent he didn't just wreck his car. He absolutely destroyed it. I mean, there was like nothing left of his car. Like you could see the camera showed the Williams mechanics and it looked like someone just shot their puppy right in front of their face. If a Williams mechanic was John Wick, the FIA would have been fucked. You know what I mean? Luckily, that wasn't the case, but Jesus, dude. I mean, this guy, he can't have even at least Gotifi had a good smile to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was really bad. And the worst part was that I don't even think he had done like a flying lap yet. That was literally him coming around on his outlap to start a flying lap. And then he comes through the very last chicane and just starts oversteering and then over throttling, trying to correct it too much. And then just bends it into the wall. And it's like the easiest turn on the track. And I just feel so bad for the Williams mechanics this year, you know, whether it's someone else crashing into them and destroying their car or Logan Sargent just destroying his car. My expectations were very low for him this season, but holy fuck.
So,
I mean,
the craziest stat that I saw was out of the past 4 races, Logan Sargent has wrecked in qualifying in half of them. So 2 out of the 4 last races, he's wrecked his car. Chandler, the reason we saw Mick Schumacher, the legendary Michael Schumacher's son, stop racing in F1 as an active driver. He's a reserve driver for Mercedes this year, but as an active driver was because he did so much damage to Haas's financial budget because he wrecked every week. One way or another, he wrecked every week. And Logan Sargent is no different.
What you've done is you have unlocked the door for me to bring back a bit that we had earlier in the season. And, you know, Gene Haas is not going to fork over money to pay for to repair the cars because he's hiding that money from the taxes he has not paid in the last couple of years. But no, essentially, because, I'm thinking about it. You talk about, or you think about the big crashes that we've seen, whether they're in qualifying. I'm not talking about like the big ones on lap 1 of a race. But, for example, Stroll's last week was awful.
Huge.
That was big. Logan's last couple of crashes have not just been little fender benders. They have been the definition of shunts. And the only thing that comes back to my mind from recent memory is Mick Schumacher's wreck at Monaco. I don't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, but where the car split in half. The Haas now had 3 cars because just split right in half behind the driver's pod.
It was more like 1.75, but I get your point. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. But I say that to say that these smaller teams, first off, if you're Red Bull, Ferrari, and you do that, you're out of a seat.
Yeah.
You're out of a seat. Like the Helmut Marko would pull the seat. I mean, Nick DeVries didn't even wreck the car. He didn't really cost AlphaTauri money more in other than performance points. He didn't wreck the car. But it's just like Williams, and we'll give him credit. or at least I don't know if I speak on y'all, but where they've come from 3 to 4 years ago, where it was still the Williams family owned it, to now they've taken some strides, and this is only hindering them. I think that, not counting this wreck, I'd sent the couple folks, they have the Constructor standings. Logan Sargent's racked up over 2.3.
It was $2.39 million.
Just shy of $2.5 million before this Grand Prix.
Yeah.
This was through the Singapore. So his, any wrecks in Singapore and all that. So $2.5 million. This was not a cheap wreck. This was, but I believe the record is Mick Schumacher from last year of $3.6 million. Logan might have blown past it with 6 races to go. And it's just something you can't afford. Latifi was actually the second highest ever with $3.3 million last year. So Williams really taking a rough toll of it. But it's just something that, you're already kind of on the fringe of, do you keep your seat next year? Whenever they look at the bottom line from a repair and maintenance standpoint and see that much money, that's not helping your case whatsoever.
Nope. Not if you're not getting points consistently. That was the only major thing that happened in Q1, though. So moving from that, out in Q1, you had Logan Sargent, Joe, you had Hulkenberg, Stroll, and Bottas. Continuously, Aston Martin Racing has just steadily declined, and Stroll being the number one contender of that decline. He wrecked last week. This week, he just didn't have the pace. That could be a preface to what happens during the race that we'll talk about in a little bit, maybe. It's sad for that team. But yeah, so moving into Q2, though, it was just business as usual, no wrecks, nothing like that. Out in Q2, though, you had Kevin Magnussen, you had Ocon, Albon, Gasly, and Lawson. So Lawson almost made it to Q3 again. I mean, dude showing up when it counts. So you feel bad for the guy because he's not going to be racing for AlphaTauri next year. He doesn't have a seat for him, but he deserves a seat somewhere, which we were just talking about it. He could be at Williams. I don't know if he wants to take that because it's Red Bull partnership and that kind of thing over, like, Williams is now the Mercedes, but yeah, I was going to say, but Alex Albon did it and he's succeeding for what he can do at Williams.
Yep. And actually what we do need to look at is that this upcoming race in Qatar is most likely, based off of reports we've had, this upcoming race in Qatar is most likely Lawson's last race, as they believe that Ricardo should be able to come back for Austin, which, not to divert too much, but that is the perfect place.
Oh yeah, 100%.
DR3 to come back. So this we do need to enjoy the Liam Lawson experience while we can, kind of like Linsanity for the Knicks back in the early 2010s. Lawsanity.
Holy throwback. Oh my gosh.
Yes, I'm telling you, I'm bringing back. I got some good throwbacks today.
Yeah. Speaking of throwbacks, last weekend, Max Verstappen did not win a race. He didn't even finish in the top 5. What is a throwback, though, is to when he was winning, right? So in Q3, Max Verstappen led the entire field for the majority of the time by over half a second. So half a second in F1, for those of you who are just getting into it, half a second is like 3 minutes ahead, relatively speaking, right? Like, it's so far ahead, like, you don't just find half a second. That's pure skill and pure car. So it's good to see Max getting back to how he has been. They definitely didn't bring the right setup last week. This week, Horner was on that ass. I mean, he made sure that they brought the right setup. Max, he obviously just destroyed the competition, like I said, in Q3. He ended up getting on pole, and then Piastri was in second place and Lando was in third. So at this point, I watched the qualifying recorded. I did not watch it live because it was at 2 a.m. And I'm glad I didn't, because of the accidents, from Logan Sargent. That shit didn't end till like 3:30. So I'm man enough. Like, we give each other shit for not staying up and all that. But I did not stay up for qualifying. Hold that thought. because we're going to absolutely roast one of you who did not stay up for the race. Speaking of the race, let's just jump right into it. So raise your hand if you're a true F1 fan and you actually stayed up to at least watch the start of the race. Chandler, why is your hand not up?
Well, you see, what happened was
The way my bank account set up.
You lied to us.
Hey,
You said
man,
you were going to stay
in
up
our
for
group
Hawaii.
text,
You said you were going to stay up for the race, and then
that was
right
also
the last minute you said, "I'm going to bed."
I never said. Did I say I was going to bed? I don't think
Yes.
that. I just went to bed.
No.
As far as I remember. But I also, whenever I said last time on this podcast, I did not know that my lovely fiance would be here and we would have a layover in which I originally
She could watch the race
Don't
too.
care. Yeah, what?
I originally intended on getting up at 4 o'clock or taking her to the airport at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
So,
save your sob story for the Chronicle or something, okay?
happy wife to be, happy life to be.
Yeah, whatever, pal. It's okay, man. You can try again next year.
Jokes on
I love you, Mary Margaret. Don't listen to them.
Jokes on Chandler. She was watching on her phone laying in bed. Like, she's like doing this. The crazy thing is
I was sound asleep and it was glorious sleep.
The crazy thing is, right? Me and Pat formulated a plan to the group chat is the three of us and then Pat's brother, Chris. In this group chat, me and Pat had texted separately, like, hey, let's send fake text into the group text. So when Chandler wakes up and reads that, she's gonna be like, what the fuck is going on? Well, Chris, if you're listening, I just want to say, let's play poker anytime, buddy. Because I'm taking all y'all's money because you are the worst poker. You have the worst poker face of all time. I mean, virtual poker face, Pat.
Okay. So to be fair, y'all both kind of blew your load a little too fast. Because the objective was to very slowly reel Chandler in and then hit him with some very crazy shit at the end.
Hey, after Singapore, I would have been you sit there and like lull me to sleep and then bang.
Hey, look, I'm just saying it was a great time for me. I tried to just get little tidbits out there for Chandler that weren't the craziest things in the world. And then we capped it off by giving him a totally
I'm going to go back and find it.
Okay.
From my side of the story, I will say this.
Hold on, Chandler. So let me read the text message. Like I'll say like my text message, right? Like, so all I said was, how the fuck did Max pull a Yuki on the formation lap? Pat said, no fucking way. And then I said, imagine shitting the bed in Singapore, then your car blows up on the formation lap with the dead emoji. Pat said, oh my God. And then Chris said, how, all caps with 4 W's, and then man, exclamation point, and then sent another one, all caps, wild.
It's like in like comic books where it's got like little thought bubbles and it's like, wow.
Yes. I'm like, oh my God. And then what was your point of view waking up to the
was that I actually rolled over thinking, okay, I got to get up and go to the airport. And it was lap 38. And again, as I mentioned to y'all earlier before we started recording, as someone who right now does not have cable because I had a bootlegged YouTube TV on my Xbox and then now YouTube TV GeoTrack, so I can't have that account anymore. So I've loved the fact that ESPN has also put the races on ESPN Plus. Woke up, rolled over at I guess it was about 3:15, 3:30. Pulled up my phone, pulled up the ESPN app, put it in, and it was like, you must be logged into a TV provider. And I said a couple of words I shouldn't have said. And then logged onto the F1 app and just went with lap by lap, which is actually a pretty good, if you can't physically get to a TV, they do a good job. Like a full-time writer for Formula One, it gives the action. So I look at that before I see any of y'all's messages. And again, obviously some of these, I can't remember the exact time when these race started. Maybe it was 2:40. So yeah, because the race started at 1 a.m. And so I see the live timing as I go, and I see that Max is leading the race. All right. I preface that. So then I finally, while I'm reading the lap by lap, I go and I see how did Max pull a Yuki on the formation lap? And then imagine shitting the bed in Singapore, then your car blows up on the formation lap. And I'm going, who the hell are they talking about? Max is leading the race, and Yuki's still in the race. I'm like, so what in the world? And then
okay, well, first off, who the fuck checks ESPN first before there was probably 20 something messages.
Because I was like, they're blowing this thing up, so something's happening. I didn't read what it was, but y'all had me hooked that something's happened.
Wow.
So I went to go pull up the Watch ESPN app, and that's when it didn't load. And so then I went to F1 to see, like, all right, where are we at now? What's happening? And then I went back and read, and then you guys at the end of the day made it win. Because I had to go back and rewatch the full race to figure out what was true and what didn't actually happen during the race.
Okay.
But I'm sitting there and I see the checker flag, and then I see the checker flag.
Cheers, Pat.
Yes, I see the checkered flag, and then I see all of a sudden, what? My phone died, and I came back, and Lando won his first race, and I'm like, wait a minute. I think they pulled one. They tried to pull one on me. So,
we did. We got you, but
yeah, did get me because I had to go watch the race.
Sorry, Chan, but that's the payment you get for not staying up when you say you will.
And I took it in full stride.
You did. Full stride, though, is a subjective matter when it comes to Formula One. Normally, a standstill start, when you jump right into a regular Formula One race, we're not going to have you do it again, but when the lights go off, Chandler, no, not going to. Okay, well, since Chandler's not going to do it again, you have the lights, and when they finally go off, cars start running full pace. They're going to get to turn one. Everybody's going to be so close. It's going to be action-packed, looking for passes. And then in most scenarios, you have a fucking Ferrari that decides to just go where there's a car. Ferraris, they have a great job. They do a great job of pushing Perez right into Hamilton. I don't know how there wasn't huge damage for both Perez and Hamilton, but it caused a chain reaction where Bottas, Ocon, like Albon, like a shit ton of drivers actually had damage from it. But the major losers on the turn one accident was Bottas and Ocon. Checo, he had nose damage. He had to pull into the pits, and his semi-decent qualifying effort was for nothing because he went all the way to the back. What if you could do anything right there? What would you do different than Checo did?
I mean,
see, you're taking too long. You know what Checo would have done if he could do it again? He would hit the Ferrari instead of the Ferrari hitting him. Then he wouldn't get damage. Easy.
He pulled out the Uno reverse card.
Yeah, that's all it takes. The thing is, right, like from all of that, there wasn't any penalties, right? Like the Ferrari didn't get a penalty. They just said it was a racing incident on lap one, turn one. But it did bring out a safety car, though. Chandler, Williams again, Logan Sargent, his poor mechanics, they worked probably through the night. Actually, they did work through the night and a little bit earlier in the morning. So explain a little bit on a 10-second penalty that Logan Sargent got before the race even started.
Yeah, so basically in the world of F1, we have what's called parc fermé. And the rules with that is that essentially, for the most part, once qualifying's over with, you can't make any major adjustments to the car. You can do some smaller things, but they're only allowed in certain time windows. But aside from that, if you have to work through the night or make major adjustments, you're going to take a penalty. Well, because Logan Sargent decided to donate half of his car in the form of debris to the grandstand going into the final straightaway, they had a lot of work to do. And it just took some time. And so as a result, they had to get in stay late that night, early in the morning, past the window of opportunity to work. So they incurred a penalty by essentially illegally working on the car. They weren't doing anything to make the car illegal. It was they were working on it during illegal time to make sure that the car would run. So as a result, 10-second penalty, which is fine. I mean, in a Williams at that point, a lot of times you're adding insult to injury. That penalty's there for in case, hey, some Red Bull mechanics say, I could Singapore, hey, our car ain't right. Let's sneak into the garage and make a few fine-tuned adjustments. So that's what does that for. But, it didn't really, to me, it doesn't really have an effect because now you're just saying, okay, well, now Sargent, if he finishes the race, is going to be a minute and 10 seconds behind 19th versus a minute behind 19th.
Yeah, I was going to say 45 seconds, but you're probably more realistic with that prediction. Penalties are so avoidable in most situations, right? So Logan Sargent, he couldn't avoid that penalty because, well, I guess just don't fucking crash in Q1, but his team worked on it on his car, breaking the rules, and ended up getting a 10-second penalty. Well, Checo Perez was completely at fault for the penalty that he occurred under the same safety car. So under the safety car, Checo pulls into pit lane to get tires, right? As he's pulling in, he passes one of the cars on the track. So he gains a position under the safety car. That's a violation. Even though he's not actually passing, he's going in the pits. He sped up and passed the car, legitimately passed the car. So he gets a 5-second time penalty. So not only is he going in to change his front wing, but now he also has a penalty as well. I mean, this dude, how many times we got to say it? This guy really just doesn't want to drive for Red Bull next year. I will keep it short and sweet with this subject because, Pat, we've already exhausted all of our.
I can't beat a dead horse any further. We're making hamburgers at this point.
Well, we're making Taco Bell. If we're beating.
I'm about to say the horse is turning into glue.
It's just dumb as hell. It's one of the easiest rules out there. Just don't pass somebody under a safety car unless you can clearly tell their car is not going. And he does that. You can't even fault anybody but him for it. Yeah. And then even on the outlap, he after he gets out of the pits, he still tries to charge ahead and pass 4 people before being like, oh shit, I actually have to let them pass now. But just a fucking donkey, man.
Well, if we're going to continue the Perez hate train, I guess is what maybe a submarine, because this dude loves to torpedo people. Well, the last two, go ahead.
I was going to say what we have had in the past is Torpedo George step aside because now we have Artillery Perez. That is what some of the social media folks are calling him now is Artillery Perez. So
okay,
howitzer into turn ones.
Okay, well, Artillery Perez, he continues his war fighting legacy. This dude. So that accident happened on the first lap. Safety car, all that fun stuff, the restarts. We get to lap 12. He's at the ass end of the field with a brand new wing, a freshly served penalty, and he artilleries. I mean, he torpedoes. Way to fuck up the metaphor, Chandler. He torpedoes Kevin Magnussen in lap 12. I mean, yet again, just like last week, didn't stand a chance of passing.
I was going to call him Pat McAfee because he just punted Hulkenberg all the way off the track.
I mean, that could also work, but now my metaphors are getting all fucked up.
Yeah.
But
like Lance Stroll's racecraft. What?
Well, dude, Checo, after he torpedoes K-Mag, he goes through his second. That was his second front wing, wrecks it. So he goes back into the pits. Right, that was on lap 12. By lap 14, the virtual safety car comes out because of all the fucking damage he did, all the carbon fiber everywhere. So it was a short VSC, but on lap 15, Checo actually retires. Well, you were talking shit about Lance Stroll's, excuse me. you were talking shit about Lance Stroll's racecraft. Well, poor dude, actually, he didn't do anything wrong. He just had a rear wing failure to where like sometimes like the wing will like do this under like high load, like heavy like G forces and stuff.
We, we saw it with Alpine's first upgrade. I don't know if you remember discussing. I can't remember if it was Hungary or where, but they were going down a straight and you see the Alpine wing doing this. And I know that a couple of drivers were like saying it's about to fall off, but that was their wing upgrade package.
Yeah, that shit looked like a wacky inflatable arm man from a car dealership, you know? Yeah, exactly. So Lance Stroll retires. Lap 22, he retires. So at this point, you have Checo and Stroll retires. Well, I don't know if it's a fucking nursing home in Japan or what, but we got to take care of our old people because let's bring the American into this bitch. Not only does he get 2 penalties in the race, not only does he crash in qualifying, but he also retires lap 26. Logan Sargeant, done. That boy's finna be in the breadline. He's screwed.
Nah, I mean, he's cooked.
Bro, the only thing he did was practice. That's the only thing he did successfully was the free practice sessions.
I just don't get it what it is with him. And honestly, just the driver's understanding of this track, because so Logan Sargeant, he crashed into Bottas in the same place that Checo punted K-Mag. And this turn, it's a hairpin turn. I think it's like turn 7 or something like that. I don't know off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, so normally you would think on turns you're trying to hit the apex, but because of the dimensions of this turn, it's a little bit wider than normal. And so you can't actually hit the apex on it and then keep your car essentially in a straight line. Like you'll spin out as soon as you hit the throttle. Yeah. And Checo goes for a torpedo, trying to hit the apex like a donkey, destroys K-Mag shit, destroys his own shit. And then Logan Sargeant is ahead of Valtteri Bottas trying to do the same thing. And Bottas goes around him. Sargent's just like, oh, I didn't see him, which, are you serious? You have rear view mirrors. And he ruins Bottas's race and then ruins his own race. And honestly, I am shocked that Williams did not have a funeral for all their mechanics after the end of this race, because they have to be fucking dead from how much work they've put into these cars. I mean, it's unreal.
What's going to cost more money? The fixes for Logan Sargent's cars or the money it's going to take to have their mechanics stay at Williams next year?
Yeah, I mean, it would freak me.
Bro, the amount of hours that they work, we need to do some research on it because it's got to be insane. It has to be.
If I'm Christian Horner or if I'm Fred Vasseur, if I have an opening on my mechanic team, I know who I'm going to. They're the hardest working mechanics on the grid.
And they know how to fix shit quick.
Exactly.
Speaking of fix shit quick, Logan Sargeant wasn't the only Williams to actually get an issue. So for the first time in a while, Williams had a double DNF. So you had Alex Albon retire on lap 28. So he had contact on that first lap accident. And Chandler, you said it was minimal, but they were seeing if he could keep going. And then it got to the point where he basically, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze at that point. He wasn't going to get in the points. So they just decided to retire.
You've already got the mechanics knowing that they've got to rebuild Logan's car by Qatar. So let's just make life a little bit easier on them and bring it in for Alex. So,
yeah. Which, I mean, Alex has done so well in that car. He has unlimited reign, right? Like if he has an accident, it's like, oh shit. Okay. We probably fucked up the setup here. This wasn't Alex's fault. If Logan Sargeant crashes, it's, here we fucking go again. This guy doesn't know how to drive anything but a left turn. What are we doing? Like, what? Can we get rid of this guy already?
A year from now, Alex Albon's going to be up for debate for better seats than this. So I think they respect him at Williams and kind of want to if they had it up to them, they'd keep him around as long as they could. I think they're not trying to say like, screw you, we can't stand you. So,
Well, you talk about like, screw you, I can't stand you kind of thing. We already talked about Checo he's probably not going to have a seat at Red Bull next year. But we discussed him retiring on lap 15. Well, I guess he's trying to prove something. He didn't want to get out of his seat in the legitimate car, not a figurative like seat. He tried to go back out. Like for 10 minutes, the news production, the TV production was showing him in the car, like getting ready to go back out. He finally does on lap 40. Pat, why on earth would a car that retired go back out?
So this is a kind of weird loophole in the rules, which you really don't see it happen in F1 a lot. It actually it happens a lot more in F2 actually, in F3. But essentially they realized, they could, the car still ran and everything, but they still had penalties that they still hadn't served from the crash and the safety car incident. And so what happens normally is that if you, for some reason, don't serve your penalties during the race, the FIA can then hand you a grid penalty to start the next race, which, I guess they're still trying to maximize Checo's return. Haven't quite given up on him yet. So they essentially send him back out for, it was like 2 laps, I think, 3 laps, 1 out lap, and he comes in for a pit stop and then has to do another lap and then retires the car again, which you're not going to see that again for a long time. And it's very bizarre, smart from a Red Bull perspective, but pretty comical for Checo.
But you talk about like this loophole, right? And Red Bull did that with Checo, but we already talked Logan Sargent. He had basically a total of 15-second time penalties for two separate penalties, and he didn't serve those before he retired. They didn't bring him back out there, and is he gonna take grid penalties for this next race, or is the FIA gonna be like, okay, well,
I think he will,
because it's subjective, right? Like the FIA can determine whether to, like, the rules they read on air, the FIA can determine whether they actually impose those grid penalties or not.
Yeah, I think it's a bit subjective. I mean, I won't be surprised if he gets a grid penalty, even though he'll probably start in last anyways. Because he did Logan Sargent did a pit stop after like lap 1 and didn't serve the penalties yet. But
no.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, I think Williams are kind of just giving up on him for the season. And plus his car was probably too damaged to even safely send back out. So it didn't really matter anyways.
Yeah. And plus you look at it from Williams of, okay, if they give I would think 15 seconds worth of penalty, call it a 5-place grid penalty. If you're Williams, you're thinking, I can almost guarantee you Logan Sargent's not pulling a rabbit out of a hat and getting into Q2. So therefore, this 5-place grid penalty really is only going to be at most 3 spots back.
Yeah.
I don't think they're too worried about it.
Yeah, that's fair. Why don't we, before we keep going in this race section of the race weekend, let's just pull into the paddock, hopefully without getting a penalty like the majority of these drivers did. Let's pull into Pat's paddock, hear from you on what's going on with team orders and all that.
Okay. So welcome back to Pat's Paddock, everybody. This week, we're going to talk about something a little bit more niche that's still pretty crucial for teams and drivers alike. So we're going to talk about driver communication. Now, to give you guys context, I think it was around like lap 40 to 50. You have Lewis Hamilton trailing George Russell and Carlos Sainz trailing Lewis Hamilton. They're all within, I think, 2 seconds of each other. Because George originally was trying to do a one-stop strategy and that was failing, this track had high tire deg, so George was essentially falling behind. Now, George starts getting on the radio telling the Mercedes pit wall that they should essentially do what Carlos Sainz did last week, where George would stay ahead and keep Lewis within DRS so that then Carlos Sainz couldn't pass them. He was getting pretty adamant about it, pretty hot-headed. And then eventually Mercedes tells him, you need to let Lewis through because Lewis is that much faster, of which, almost as soon as Lewis gets past, then Carlos Sainz goes flying past him too anyways. Sainz ended up not catching Lewis, but it was a big deal for George because then he lost, a handful of points from that.
I think the funniest quote that came over the radio after, during that whole interaction, Pat, was when Carlos Sainz came on the radio and said, they're trying to use my move against me.
Yeah.
Like he invented
this patented Carlos Sainz Jr. move.
And it didn't work because they're so fucking selfish at Mercedes. Chandler,
yeah,
they clearly, whether that be Toto or just I don't know, the upper management at Mercedes made it clear that Lewis Hamilton is still the number one driver.
Or did.
And George Russell needs to remember that until he leaves the team.
Absolutely. I think that we've spoke on it before. I think that the world of F1 kind of speaks on it of while George is a very good driver.
Yes.
He still has a lot more of that whiny ego that needs to be put in check.
Bitch boy attitude, yeah.
It needs to be put in check if he's going to eventually compete for a world championship, whether that's with Mercedes or not. And I think this is just another example of looking at the bigger picture, and George doesn't, whether it's
to be fair though, Chandler, I get where you're coming from, but to be fair, they fucked him.
They did. The one-stop strategy.
If you're gonna switch, Lewis was clearly quicker.
Yes,
that is fine. You can let him pass, but they didn't say like that. Lewis, if you let Lewis pass, he'll do the DRS.
Yeah.
After they switched, George was like, "Hey, can you back him up? I need the DRS to fight Carlos." And they were not. They didn't respond for like 2 laps, and by that time, Carlos was already past. Literally, Carlos was side by side with George when Mercedes was like, "Sure, we'll back up." It's like, well,
at this point now, if you back Lewis up, you risk giving him up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
Pat, Mercedes gave George Russell just the biggest middle finger you could ever ask for. It actually, though, wasn't the only middle finger, right?
Yeah. So we had a very, very funny and heated moment a bit later in the race. Now, this really isn't a crazy spoiler. So late in the race, you have both Ocon and Gasly essentially right next to each other. Ocon's in front, Gasly's behind, and they're trying to catch up to Fernando Alonso, who he already got fucked by the Aston Martin strategy, but he was well ahead of them. Now, because Pierre Gasly was faster, the team told him, okay, you're going to switch with Ocon, and then you're going to go ahead and try to catch Alonso. Now, it's kind of an unspoken thing, I guess. At least Ocon said in post-race interviews, just kind of a known thing, but they didn't explicitly tell Pierre, hey, if you don't catch him, you're going to give that place back. Despite him being faster anyways, and probably would have passed Ocon, on the penultimate lap, they start coming over the radio telling Pierre Gasly, hey, you need to give that place back. And Pierre Gasly's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And they're in like 9th and 10th place. This is for 1 point difference.
Yeah.
And so they're basically playing phone tag with Ocon and Gasly, trying to get Gasly to switch around. Gasly finally does switch around on the last lap. And after he crosses the finish line, he just sticks his hand up through the halo and just flips the bird to the entire pit wall and just holds it there as he's driving around the track. And he had been yelling into the radio and everything like that, basically essentially saying it was disrespectful, all this other shit. And it was pretty comical, but it's a bit weird in F1 because you are both fighting for yourself in the drivers' championship and a team. Some other notable incidents of things like this, at least my personal favorite being a Red Bull fan. was 2013 Malaysia, where you have Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel getting a coded message called multi-2-1, which was essentially telling Sebastian Vettel, hey, hold in place. And he says, no, fuck you, and passes Mark Webber to take the win. And team orders were not allowed for, I think, about 8 years, from like 2002 to 2010, 2011, which kind of dumb. People don't like it because it's kind of the teams meddling with the actual racing.
Yeah.
And usually it kind of just falls into categories of either, hey, switch around, feel free to race your teammate, or just hold position, don't fuck up the car and bring it home. And so team orders, pretty big part of driver communication. Something else that I think a lot of people don't really pick up on is that so the teams can all hear each other through all these interactions. The drivers can't talk to each other, but the pit walls can absolutely hear each other. So you'll hear them talking coded messages, playing A, B, C, whatever. You'll hear them call for fake messages to box and things like that. And it's a pretty important part of a driver's race, obviously, just communicating with the pit wall. It's got a very kind of tango-y way of going about it with the engineers and the team and the drivers. And then also, you'll have instances where drivers can't actually hear the team during like a formation lap. I have no idea why, but like teams can't talk to the drivers during the formation lap. And you'll come up with these very funny instances of racing where you get somebody flipping the bird off. And it's all just it's a matter of communication, baby. It's like a nice relationship. You need to communicate properly.
Yeah. So that was towards the end of the race, Pat, where that Mercedes drama was happening. Luckily, in front of it, though, McLaren, Chandler, boy, we were in. So Max Verstappen was leading by a day and a half, but McLaren was leading. Well, I would say leading, but that's because Max was so far ahead. McLaren was in second and third. You had Lando in second, and then Oscar Piastri in third. So it ended up finishing that way. So to win the race, you had Max Verstappen. Whatever, don't give a fuck. Lando Norris came in second place, and then Oscar Piastri in third. Chandler, what is the significance of that McLaren double podium finish?
It is our boy Oscar's. We talked about his rookie status earlier. It is his first podium in a full-blown race. He had one at, I think it was Spa, where they had the sprint. He had the podium there. But this is his first full podium at a full feature race, first of many. There will be a lot more wins, a lot more double podiums, at least next year, I really wholeheartedly believe.
Yeah.
But it's a good sign of things to come. And then on top of that, we mentioned it earlier about, as a rookie, he's in the top 10 going into this race. He vaulted himself to seventh in the driver standings and is not out of the reach. I'd say there's a chance sixth,
fifth. I think
fifth if everything goes right. But realistically, to finish sixth as a rookie is outstanding.
Yeah.
And then again, you asked about the McLaren as a whole, the double podium. I'm trying to think when it was, if it was Austria or Canada, wherever like I said, Alpine, you're next. We're coming for you. Thinking fifth place, that's good from where we started. Boy, I tell you what, Mr. Lawrence Strollovich Jr., a.k.a. Lance Stroll, is falling off the rails. Fernando Alonso, the honeymoon phase is over on the rocket ship that is the Aston Martin hype train.
Well,
they're only 49 points behind Aston Martin for fourth.
Well, right now for the driver standing, like you're talking about like Aston Martin. So Alonso is at 174 points.
Uh-huh.
Lance Stroll, if you had to guess, what would you think he's at?
He's got to be under 50.
Okay, well that was real specific. Pat,
I'm saying he's anywhere between 40. I want to say 45 to 50. Points. He's somewhere between 45 and 50.
What'd you say, Pat?
I'd say 24 points.
Okay, well, you're fucking high right now. There's no shot he's that low. Chandler, you actually were really close. Since you said 50 in your answer, if this was the Price is Right, you would lose.
Wow.
It's 47 points. So Alonso's at 174 and Stroll's at 47. It's a good thing his dad owns the team because, buddy, you ain't staying if that's the case. The other notable comparison I want to talk about is Lando Norris and George Russell. So after this race, the two drivers are actually tied. What do you think their points are at? They're tied. It's above 100. I'll give you that.
115 to me is what I'm going to go with.
Let's say 121.
Chandler got it right on the money.
Oh, that's a McLaren fan.
He finally gets a prediction right. It's 115 points for Lando Norris and George Russell. So pretty crazy. What's even crazier is you look at Max Verstappen's number. He's at 400. he's at 400 points. He can clinch after this race. He can clinch the driver's standings at Qatar during the sprint race. So those points are pretty crazy to talk about. You know, they're interesting to see how they'll finish out throughout the rest of the season. Pat, one thing I did want to talk about, since you are wearing your Red Bull shirt, this race, Max almost clinched the driver's championship, but he couldn't do that this race. He will next race probably, barring anything crazy. But Red Bull did clinch something. What was the significance of the Japanese Grand Prix?
So because of Max's finishing standings, despite a double DNF from Checo, we clinched the World Constructors Championship for the 6th time, of which I think in recent history, I think Mercedes leads with 8, which pretty big deal for Red Bull. You know, they're going to get a shit ton of money from that. Shit ton of money from Max winning, hopefully in Qatar. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a testament to, you know, all the stuff that Newey and Horner and Paul Menahan, all those people that run Red Bull do. You know, it's been a wicked amount of just wizardry from them creating a car like that. And, you know, they celebrated the shit out of it.
As they should.
I wonder how many cans of Red Bull they spent just throwing at each other. But yeah, they clinched the Constructors Championship, and now it's a pretty big fight for second, third, and down the order.
Yeah. I'm excited to see the best of the rest for the Constructors Championship. Chandler, you either win or you lose. You never come in second place when it comes to our predictions. Last race, the Singapore Grand Prix, you won. You got to pick first for the Japanese Grand Prix, which we're talking about today. You picked Lewis Hamilton to finish highest other than Max Verstappen. Okay, that's a decent pick, right? I picked Charles Leclerc. I thought it could be a good pick. You never know. Ferrari could be hit or miss. Pat picked Lando Norris. McLaren's shown pace, but is it enough to compete? Well, Chandler, you suck ass. Pat, you won this prediction with Lando Norris. The next race is going to be in Qatar, so you get to pick for that race first. Go ahead. Who are you picking for the Qatar Grand Prix?
I'm just gonna roll with Lando again. I think the track will suit the McLaren car well. You know, they're in pretty good form, so I'll just keep it rolling with Lando.
Interesting. Well, to make this short and sweet, my pick for the Qatar Grand Prix is going to be Charles Leclerc again. So I didn't want to pick him, but I think that Ferrari's going to have some good pace. As long as it's not too warm out there in Qatar where they have actual like technical difficulties, like mechanical issues, I think he'll finish highest. Chandler, moving to you. Last place, last pick. Who are you picking to win?
You're leaving the door open for my pick. He's either going to finish first or he's going to finish last among the three. But I'm taking Oscar Piastri. I got to. Can't leave him out there. We've seen Oscar. He's either going to finish first among our three or he's going to finish last among our three. So here we are, sticking to true form.
Well, that's fake news because he finished behind Lando Norris and in front of
when he's picked in this group. He's
okay.
Because I think one of us took him in Spa and he DNF'd.
Yeah,
probably me.
Probably you. I think that was you. I'm pretty sure that was you. But anyways, everybody, that was the Japanese Grand Prix. This is figuring out the formula. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So the next race, like I said, is the Qatar Airways Grand Prix. It's not this weekend. It is the weekend after. So that is the 6th through the 8th. It is a sprint race weekend. So the sprint race is actually Saturday at 1:30 p.m. So Chandler, there's no excuse for you to go to sleep for this one.
I'm at work. I might be sleeping.
God. I don't even know. So we're going to move on. We're still going to roast Chandler for that, but the race is going to be at 1 p.m. that Sunday, October the 8th. So I say again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe at Figuring Out the Formula. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.